Undercover boss orders chicken nuggets. At his own restaurant, freezes when he sees what's inside the box. The Texas sun poured down on Houston's bustling streets, casting a glittering glow on the glass facade of Chicky Pop's 87th restaurant, but only on the outside. Inside, everything was completely different. Michael Carter, 50 years old, the illustrious founder and CEO of Chicky Pop, gently pulled down the brim of his baseball cap, hiding his familiar silver hair. His sharp eyes scanned the restaurant, unnoticed by anyone. Beneath the worn jacket and faded jeans, no one could have guessed that the man quietly standing in the middle of the dining area was the undercover boss, the very man who had grown Chicky Pop from a tiny food stall into a billion-dollar restaurant chain. But today, he wasn't here for that glory. He was here for answers. The tiled floors were stained with old grease marks. The service counter, covered in a thin layer of dust, just running a finger over it would be enough to write a question. What happened to this place? Michael frowned slightly as a young employee brushed past without greeting the customers. Behind the counter, the sound of stifled giggles mixed with the tapping of fingers on a smartphone screen. There wasn't even a half-hearted, "Welcome to Chicky Pop," the signature phrase he had once drilled into thousands of employees when building the brand. And that was when the seeds of decline became painfully clear. Michael placed a simple order: 1 small chicken nuggets and fries, to go. The cashier girl didn't even lift her eyes from her phone. $10, she muttered, not even bothering to count the change. Michael gently clenched his fist, a bitter feeling rising in his chest. As he left the counter, he picked a quiet corner near the window, observing everything with eyes that missed nothing. He knew well there was no need to flip through financial reports to understand something was rotting from within. And if Chicky Pop was to be saved, he would have to see it with his own eyes, touch it with his own hands, and start from the smallest thing, a box of chicken nuggets. The inspection began, but this time, Michael Carter wasn't here as a CEO. He had come as the undercover boss, and what he was about to discover would be hard to swallow. The paper box holding the nuggets was placed on the table with a lazy motion, accompanied by a weary sigh from the server. Michael Carter quietly pulled the tray closer, his eyes narrowing beneath the old cap. At first glance, everything seemed normal. The familiar golden color was still there, but under the harsh sunlight streaming through the window, he noticed that the color was darker. The coating seemed thick and coarse, a far cry from the light, crisp perfection he had painstakingly crafted over 2 decades. Michael slowly picked up one nugget. It felt lighter than usual. And when he took a bite, the sensation was immediately off. Instead of the subtle sweetness of fresh chicken blended with the exclusive mix of 11 signature spices, his tongue was met with something bland, rubbery, and artificial. The interior texture was spongy and hollow, with an odd greasy aftertaste. Michael recognized all too well that was the telltale sign of cheap filler. He set the nugget down, his palm slightly trembling. With a chilling calmness, Michael carefully lifted the paper liner from the bottom of the tray, and at that very moment, the truth revealed itself like a hammer blow to his pride. A crumpled delivery receipt was hidden beneath the thin sheet. On it, the name Value Poultry Distribution was boldly printed, standing out like a direct challenge. Michael closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Value Poultry? That name had never been authorized. Chicky Pop worked with only 2 approved suppliers, and every contract bore his signature. Anyone sourcing unauthorized supplies was toying with the company's reputation, legal boundaries, and his patience. He looked around. Every indifferent glance, every careless gesture from the staff passed before his eyes like a slow-motion film. In that moment, Michael was no longer just an old man in a worn baseball cap. In his mind, he had reclaimed his position of power, his eyes burning with the same fire from his early days as a founder. Game over, people. He pulled out his phone and dialed a familiar number. Alicia, get ready. Assemble the entire executive team. I just uncovered something that's going to shake our entire system. On the other end, Alicia, the executive vice president, suddenly sounded ice cold. Where are you, Michael? Right at the scene. And this time, I'm exposing everything myself. The call ended. Michael gripped the delivery receipt, feeling each deep crease press into his palm. He knew from this moment on, there was no turning back. The Undercover Boss campaign had officially begun, and this time, there would be no forgiveness. After that fateful call, Michael Carter didn't return to headquarters as usual. He spent the entire night in a hotel room, seated beside his laptop and a cold cup of coffee. Along with Alicia, he launched an emergency internal investigation, tracing every line of data like a seasoned detective. And then, layer by layer, the veils of secrecy slowly began to lift. The electronic invoices, which at first glance appeared perfectly clean and procedurally correct, actually hid an extremely sophisticated dual-ledger accounting system. One set of records was submitted to headquarters flawless, without a single blemish, and another, buried deep beneath cryptic code markings, clearly documented transactions with value poultry distribution. Michael clasped his hands, eyes locked on the screen. "Is there anyone in our system capable of orchestrating something this elaborate without leaving a trace?" he asked, his voice low and cold. Alicia fell silent for a moment before answering. "Only someone with the highest level of managerial access at the restaurant and full authority over supply chain approvals." A name appeared on the report, cold and undeniable. Renee Polson, manager at the flagship Houston branch. The very person once celebrated at year-end galas for her exceptional cost-cutting efficiency, and now, it turned out, she was the central figure in a large-scale embezzlement scheme. And the bigger shock, Renee Polson wasn't working alone. Through shrewd family connections, she had partnered with her brother-in-law, the man behind Value Poultry Distribution, a small company barely over a year old, operating without a legitimate supplier license for the Chicky Pop network. The invoice values were inflated by 50%, but the products delivered were cheap, heavily padded with fillers, and often didn't meet safety standards. Michael stood up and walked to the window. Beneath the glittering city lights, he saw his younger self from 20 years ago, back when he built this brand with nothing but self-respect and a burning desire to serve meals made with care and integrity. Now, it was all being sold out for greed, but that wasn't the end of it. In Alicia's special report, Michael saw familiar names: Emma Bennett, the young employee he had noticed during his undercover visit, and several other outspoken staff members. They had filed internal complaints, tried to call the corporate hotline, but every grievance mysteriously vanished. Shortly afterward, they found their working hours cut. Some were even forced out under the pretext of not fitting the company culture. Emashi was still there, but now she was scheduled only during off-peak hours, relegated to working in the kitchen, kept far away from direct customer contact. Michael clenched his fists. They have stripped away the voices of those with a conscience. His eyes burned brightly behind his glasses. It was time for those silenced voices to rise again. And this time, standing behind them, would be none other than CEO Michael Carter himself. He turned to Alicia, eyes full of unshakable resolve. "Tomorrow morning, I want to be there. No more hiding in plain sight. I'll make sure every last one of them knows the undercover boss has returned. And this time, I'll personally deliver justice for every person who's been oppressed." The battle had begun, and he knew this confrontation wouldn't stop at just one restaurant in Houston. It would send a warning to the entire Chicky Pop system. Michael Carter, under the alias Mike, started working as a new employee at the Houston Chicky Pop location. From his very first days, he noticed the widespread indifference toward proper work protocols. Employees ignored hygiene procedures, food was improperly stored, and customer service lacked any professionalism. One evening, while cleaning the kitchen area, Michael stumbled upon a forgotten delivery receipt under the counter. The supplier's name was clearly listed as Value Poultry Distribution, a name not found on the official list of Chicky Pop's approved vendors. This raised immediate red flags, and Michael resolved to investigate further. He quietly collected more invoices and cross-checked them against the inventory system. It didn't take long for him to discover that over the past 3 months, the restaurant had been purchasing large quantities of chicken from Value Poultry at unusually high prices. This not only violated company policies, but also compromised the food's quality and the brand's reputation. As the investigation deepened, Michael uncovered that the restaurant manager, Renee Polson, had a close personal relationship with the operator of Value Poultry. Together, they orchestrated a scheme supplying low-quality meat at inflated prices, splitting the profits and hiding the transactions from the official inventory records. During his shifts, Michael met Emma, a young, enthusiastic, and honest waitress. She confided that she had tried reporting these violations to higher management, but Renee retaliated by cutting her hours and threatening her job security. Emma also revealed that several of her co-workers were forced to resign after raising similar concerns. These revelations made Michael realize just how deep the corruption ran. He decided to call an emergency meeting with the senior management team to expose the entire truth and implement solutions to protect Chicky Pop's reputation and core values. That afternoon, sunlight streamed through Chicky Pop's large glass windows, casting a brilliant glow over the restaurant. But inside, the air was heavy with tension. A sudden, urgent announcement echoed over the internal PA system. All staff and management, please report to the main conference room immediately. There is an important announcement from the corporation. Worried glances were exchanged. Whispers echoed down the hallway. Renee Pulsant, once powerful, manager entered the conference room. Her face tense, though she struggled to maintain a confident facade. Just moments later, the door opened. A middle-aged man in a sharp gray suit, hair streaked with silver, eyes cold yet calm, walked in amidst the heavy silence. No one expected this. That man was none other than Michael Carter, 50 years old, the undercover boss, and the very founder of the Chicky Pop empire. Michael removed the fake name tag from his chest and spoke in a calm but resolute voice. I think it's time you all knew exactly who I am. I am Michael Carter, and today I stand before you not to speak about profits but about honor, about the values Chicky Pop has lost right under this very roof. Without waiting for any reaction, Michael gave a slight nod. The big screen behind him lit up, and a series of undeniable video clips played before their stunned eyes. The irrefutable evidence appeared. Footage of crates bearing the Value Poultry logo being secretly delivered into the kitchen during late-night shifts. Audio recordings of scheming conversations. Renee's voice was crystal clear. As long as profits rise, who cares what the customers are eating? Forged invoices, double accounting books displayed side by side, every discrepancy laid out in plain sight. The air in the room seemed to freeze. Renee's face turned pale, beads of sweat forming on her forehead despite the cool air conditioning. Michael looked directly at her, his gaze no longer that of a CEO but of a disappointed father. Miss Renee Paulson, as of this very moment, you are officially terminated, and I'm afraid those others on this list. Michael held up a thick file, will soon be contacted by law enforcement. I have already submitted all evidence to our legal department and the proper authorities. Everything you've done has been recorded. A wave of gasps swept through the room. Some lowered their heads in shame, others trembled, barely able to breathe. Michael didn't stop there. He turned toward Emmethy, young employee who had bravely stood up for what was right, even after having her hours cut simply for asking a question. Emma Bennett, I have read your report. I know you tried to speak up when others chose silence. From today, you are officially appointed as floor manager at this branch. I believe it's people like you who deserve to shape the future of Chicky Pop. A heartfelt and emotional round of applause broke out. Emma's eyes glistened with tears. She stood up, bowed deeply, and softly said, "Thank you, Mr. Carter. I promise I will never let these values fade away again." Michael closed the meeting with a firm and powerful statement. I built Chicky Pop from the days when all I had was a small food cart and a belief that everyone deserves to be served with honesty and real values. Starting today, we will reclaim that not with promises, but with action. The conference room doors opened, and sunlight poured directly onto the faces of everyone present, as if marking a brand new beginning. The entire room fell into a heavy, suffocating silence. The ticking of the wall clock echoed sharply, counting every 10th second, weighing down on everyone's shoulders. Michael Carter placed a voice recorder on the table and gently pressed a button. The recording played in the deathly silence of the room. As long as we slip these shipments through, we're doubling our profits. The big boss never checks thoroughly anyway. What they eat isn't our problem. The cold, calculating voice of Renee Paulson echoed through the conference room. The space seemed to shrink and tighten as each word rang out, loud and clear. Michael turned his unwavering gaze toward Renee. Her face had gone pale, her makeup unable to hide the beads of cold sweat forming on her forehead. Perhaps you forgot, Miss Paulson, that to me, quality isn't just a slogan printed on a billboard. Michael pulled out a thick file and flipped through page after page filled with discrepancies, purchase records from Value Poultry Distribution. He continued, his voice low but cutting like ice. While our customers paid for quality, you served them products that didn't even meet basic health standards. You slashed the rightful wages of our employees, yet had no hesitation sharing the dirty profits among yourselves. And now, take a look at the result, Renee. On the big screen, the videos changed scene after scene. Footage of Value Poultry employees secretly delivering shipments into the warehouse during late nights. A clip showing Renee signing off on invoices in her office with the door firmly closed, no staff allowed inside to verify. A series of text messages between Renee and other branch managers appeared clearly on the screen, every word in full display. Tighten it up. The customers won't notice a thing. What matters is the profit. Michael slowly stood up straight, sweeping his eyes across the room. At this very moment, is there anyone among you who dares stand up and say you knew nothing about all of this? No one responded. All eyes were cast down. avoiding his gaze. Michael let out a quiet sigh. His voice softened but carried the heavy weight of a disappointed father rather than the anger of a furious CEO. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed every customer who trusted Chicky Pop. You betrayed the parents who bought meals for their children, believing it was a safe choice. And worst of all, you betrayed your own conscience. At that moment, Emma stood up abruptly. She walked straight toward Michael, her eyes glistening with tears, yet unwavering and determined. Mr. Carter, I'm sorry I didn't have the courage to speak up sooner, but if there's still a chance, I promise to protect the values that Chicky Pop once stood for. I don't ever want to see another child eat something that shouldn't even be called food. The room erupted in applause not commanded, but born out of genuine admiration for her bravery and the long-awaited truth finally being spoken. Michael smiled gently, his eyes softening. Emma Bennett, starting today, you will take on the role of floor manager. I need people like you not only to work with their hands, but to preserve our values with their hearts. Turning to the rest of the employees, Michael declared loudly and clearly, to those who want to stand with me and rebuild Chicky Pop, the doors are always open. But for those who only live for greed and deceit, he turned and strode out of the room with firm, decisive steps. The sound of his footsteps echoed like a final warning. An old era had just closed, and the door to rebirth officially opened. Under the brilliant morning sun of Houston, the old, worn-out Chicky Pop sign was taken down, replaced by a brand-new, gleaming logo. Below it, a bold inscription stood out, Chicky Pop, returning to true values. Inside the restaurant, the atmosphere felt completely renewed. The floors sparkled, reflecting the bright light streaming through freshly installed glass windows. The wooden tables were polished to perfection, and each corner held small, simple vases of fresh flowers, brimming with life. Michael Carter stood quietly at the entrance, his eyes no longer heavy with disappointment as they had been in days past. Instead, there was a calm serenity and a spark of hope. He nodded softly as he saw Emma now officially floor manager, urgently adjusting the body of a new hire. Emma has now become the ideal role model for the new generation of employees, putting her heart into every action. She doesn't need to issue orders. It's her dedication that naturally inspires the entire team to change. The first reform: elimination of all sales quotas. Gone are the tense meetings focused solely on profit margins. Instead, Michael issued a new policy. Customers are not targets to hit revenue goals. They are people to be listened to and respected. Oh, every serving of chicken nuggets is now subjected to strict quality control. A QR code system has been implemented on every package of ingredients. With just a quick scan on their phones, customers can immediately know the origin of the product, the production and expiration dates, and even inspiring stories about the farmers who supply clean, quality ingredients. Quality is no longer an empty promise. It's a transparent truth reflected in every product. Catherine Martinez, the legendary customer service icon, returns. She doesn't come back as a distant advisor, but dons her old uniform and stands shoulder to shoulder with Emma at the service counter, offering warm smiles to every guest. Remember, Catherine tells the young staff, a genuine smile is something that can't be faked. Just like the food we serve customers can always tell when you're not being sincere. James Chin, the master chef of Chicky Pop, returns to the kitchen. In the newly refurbished, gleaming kitchen, James carefully teaches the young chefs how to perfectly fry a piece of chicken. The crust should be golden and crispy, but not too dry. The meat inside tender and flavorful, infused with the signature family recipe. We're not just cooking meals, James says, his eyes filled with both sternness and deep care. We're putting our self-respect into every piece of chicken that customers will serve to their families. A clear transformation has taken shape. Customers now walk into Chicky Pop not just for a quick meal, but to experience the feeling of being treated like honored guests. An elderly gentleman sits by the window, savoring his hot, freshly cooked meal, while smiling gently at the bustling streets outside. A young couple brings their child along, enjoying cheerful conversations without worrying about the quality of their food. Michael quietly strolls down the glass corridor, his fingertips brushing gently against the newly hung sign unveiled that morning. Chicky Pop, where values are kept close to the heart. He turned to Emma, his voice deep but warm. You know, Emma, we're not just fixing a brand. We've just restored a belief that was nearly buried. And you are living proof that if even one person dares to stand tall amidst a storm, everything can be rebuilt from the ground up. Oh, Emma's eyes shone with pride, her hands gently clutching her new name tag, Emma Bennett, floor manager. Just then, the front doorbell chimed, welcoming the first customer of the new day. Michael smiled. Today, Chicky Pop had truly come back to life stronger than ever. Michael Carter stood quietly by the large glass window of the Chicky Pop restaurant, the golden rays of the late afternoon sun stretching across the brand new tiled floor. Inside, the sound of laughter and conversation echoed joyfully. A group of staff members were helping customers scan QR codes to check the origins of their food. And in the corner by the counter, Imanau, proudly wearing her new floor manager uniform, listened patiently to a curious young boy asking about the legendary fried chicken. Michael smiled gently. All those years steering this ship, he once believed that the brand's value lay in revenue figures and the growing number of store locations marked across the map. But today, he finally understood. You can't measure the value of a person by the suit they wear or the title they carry. True value is when the smallest among us dares to lift their head high, and those standing on the highest peaks remember to bow down and truly listen. He stepped inside not with the bearing of a powerful CEO, but like a seasoned craftsman returning to his old workshop, ready to work alongside his team to create something honest from the simplest of things. Right by the entrance, under the newly polished Chicky Pop logo, a fresh inscription had just been etched onto a gleaming brass plaque. Some doors only open when we're willing to step down, and some values can only be found again when we're brave enough to pick them up from the lowest places. End. And just like that, in that very moment, not in some flashy boardroom or through triumphant business reports, but right there in the restaurant's welcoming lobby, amidst the warm greetings and the irresistible aroma of fried chicken, Chicky Pop truly opened a new door. A door not just to prosperity, but to the hearts of people. Michael Carter slowly walked into the main hall, where the crystal chandeliers no longer shone just for show, but stood as beacons of transparency, casting light into every corner that had once been forgotten. And on the large wooden table in the center of the hall, Michael saw something that made him pause in silent awe. Tasha, young employee who once couldn't even raise her head to meet a manager's gaze, was now confidently teaching a group of school children how to recognize clean, safe food. Her voice rang out proudly. At Chicky Pop, there's nothing hidden behind the kitchen doors. Here, kids, you can scan this QR code and instantly know where this batch came from and when it was quality checked. A small boy exclaimed, "Wow, so I can even find out who raised the chickens, ma'am." Laughter rang out bright and pure, and in that moment, Michael realized the true value of a brand doesn't lie within luxurious glass walls, but in the spark of trust shining in a child's eyes and in the pride returning to the faces of the workers. He walked toward Emma Wanse oppressed, now standing tall and confidently coordinating everything as if she had been born for this role. She saw him, paused for a second, then Smielda look filled with gratitude, but also unwavering determination. "Emma," Michael said softly, his voice as warm and calm as a late afternoon breeze. "Back then, you only dared to watch from the sidelines. And now?" Emma smiled, adjusting the manager's name tag on her chest. "I think it's time I stepped out of the shadows and stood exactly where I belong, sir." Michael nodded gently, turning toward the gathered crowd. At that moment, he was no longer just the man with absolute power, but the one igniting a new journey, a journey to reclaim the values they all thought were lost. Before the expectant eyes of everyone, Michael spoke, his voice calm, yet resounding through the space. "I used to believe that people only respected those who stood above them. But today, I learned a lesson I hadn't truly understood in all my 50 years. True value is when the smallest among us dares to lift their head high, and those standing on the highest peaks remember to bow down and truly listen." And the fact. He gestured toward the brass plaque newly hung at the entrance, where the engraved words gleamed under the soft lights. "Some doors only open when we're willing to step down, and some values can only be found again when we're brave enough to pick them up from the lowest places." In that moment, applause broke out. Not for a rousing speech, but because every person in that room understood that from this day on, they were no longer just serving food. They were part of rebuilding a legacy through kindness, through listening, and through the simplest of acts. Michael left the restaurant when night had fully fallen, the city lights of Houston stretching out before him like stars brought down to earth. He didn't head straight back to the corporate headquarters. Instead, he stopped at a small roadside diner, very place where he and his mother had first dreamed up the recipe for their original fried chicken. Ordering a simple plate of fried chicken, Michael closed his eyes. And for the first time in many years, he smiled, free from worries about profits, stock prices, or boardroom battles. Because from this day forward, Michael knew Chicky Pop was no longer just a restaurant chain. It had become a place where any, regardless of their position, could hold their head high and be treated with genuine respect. And that, to Michael Carter, was the greatest profit he had ever earned in his entire life.